all for coming. I don't usually use a microphone because I have a big voice already, but they say that we need it. So as Ed said, my name is Emily Mitchell. I'm a psychology faculty member, and I also serve as the coordinator for the Pride Center. And this is my esteemed colleague, Alejandra, and she is our student personnel assistant for the Pride Center and is the face, really, of our Pride Center because she's there all day long. So today we're going to be talking about some various different things. So first, we want to have an understanding of gender and sexual identity development, some of the challenges that are faced by students on campus, and then we're going to practice with some tips on how to be an ally. We're going to work some scenarios. We're going to talk, just sort of answer any questions that you have or anything else. So first, how many of you were a little bit confused by the plus? When did a plus get added? What's happening? Why is there a plus sign? What did I miss? So here's the deal, right? So how many of you have seen like LGBTQ Ally, right? And everybody rightfully wants their identity acknowledged in the acronym. It just starts getting really long. Yes? So it's sort of an efficiency shortcut. Right? Hey. You add a plus, everybody welcome. Right? It just makes it easier. Okay. All right. So let's sort of start by defining some terms and clearing up some confusion. And look, terms are always evolving. They are always changing. And if you're like, I do not know what you are talking about, that does not make you a bad person. It doesn't mean you're not in the know. I teach human sexuality for a living, and I'm the Pride Center coordinator. And every day I'm like, nuh-uh, really? Somebody tells me something I didn't know. Okay? This isn't a place where you're going to be made to feel badly if you don't know the answer. It's not a game of gotcha. Oh, you don't know, right? Let's just talk about it, and then that makes it tremendously easier. So we just sort of use this graphic because it's helpful, and this is our genderbread person. Right? Gender, see, not like gender. Okay, fine. You guys are like, you've lost me already. So we're going to talk about a couple of different things here. So I always start with this one because it makes me laugh because those of us, well, all of us should really know this. So it points to the heart and it says attraction, right? We know that attraction doesn't actually come from your heart, right? We are aware of that part. It actually comes from our brain, but it makes for a cute dynamic there. So attraction is obviously who you're into, right? Like who do you want to sleep with? Who do you want to date? Who are you into? Identity comes from our brain, so does attraction again, but we won't get into that. Identity is what we see ourselves at, how we identify. Sex is the biological aspects, either the chromosomes, which I know don't exist up here in the air, but I don't know, that's what I do, and the genitals, okay? And then expression, right, is how we express, for example, our gender, yes? Like what do we do? How do we express that? Okay. All right, so can somebody tell me the difference between sex and gender? Again, this is not a game of, ooh, I know more than you, okay? What's the difference between sex and gender? Anybody know? Yeah. First of all, what's your name?
My name is Antonio.
Hi, Antonio.
Sex typically refers to like biological, like you mentioned earlier, the X and Y chromosomes and stuff like that. So biological assignments, and then gender typically refers to more of like an identity or a social, as a social construct.
Yeah, very good. So sex is the biological aspects, either the chromosomes XX, XY. We know it's actually even more complicated than that, of course, which we'll talk about in a moment. Also the genitalia. But gender is really a social construction. It's what society says, oh, this is what people who we've assigned as female are like, and this is what people who we have assigned as male are like, okay? And we often sort of, even with sex, we tend to think, okay, I got this, right? X, 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 Y. Male sex, female sex, right? Is that true? Is that all there is? No, okay? So even within the realm of sex, the biological aspects, the chromosomal aspects, or the genital aspects, we also have intersex, which is an umbrella term, right? That broadly defined basically means either a mismatch between the chromosomes and the genitals, or ambiguous genitalia that doesn't clearly indicate one biological sex or another. Okay? And so how many of you have never heard the term intersex? It's okay. Okay. Have any of you heard another term that you're like, I think that might be what this is? No, not quite. Any other term? Okay, androgynous usually refers to the way in which one presents oneself. Right. So how many of you have heard that term? Okay. Today that's considered a derogatory term and not one we use, mainly because hermaphrodism had been associated with essentially like circus sideshows and the sort of things like that, right? Hermaphrodism is an actual intersex condition. It's when an individual has a testis and an ovary. Okay? But hermaphrodite, when someone says someone's a hermaphrodite, that's not the term we use anymore, and the correct term is intersex. But if you were thinking like, oh, I think that means the same thing, that is what it means. And do you think that intersex is common or rare? I should really make this like animated so then it's like I'm not giving it away. Yeah.
What about the word cryptorchid?
Whoa, what's happening? I don't even know this word.
Then you learn something.
I know, right? Yes, please tell me.
My wife's a veterinarian.
Okay.
Apparently that's a real word describing some kind of mix of sexes, but I don't
Oh.
actually know what it means because I'm not a veterinarian.
Wow, well, your wife needs to send me this because I've never heard this before. I mean, I'm sure it's true, right? And we know, like within the animal kingdom, actually, there are animals that switch sex over their lifetime, which is phenomenally interesting, right? But I do not know that term. Okay, send it to me. All right.
Something new today.
I love to learn something new every day. So is intersex within humans, is this common or rare? It's pretty common, right? So, right, this always happens. Whenever I say this in class, right, and I say as often as you interact with someone who has naturally occurring red hair is as often as you've interacted with someone with an intersex condition, and then they think that if you have red hair, right, that's what always, and it's like, no, and we're talking about rate or frequency, friends, rate or frequency, right? So it's actually really common. One in every 1,500 to 2,000 births has some form of intersex condition. It's super common, we just don't talk about it. And that's why we think like, this is so rare. It's not rare at all, actually, okay? So that's kind of like sex. So now we know it's not even just binary on the sex dimension, right? It's not just male or just female, but there's actually even more going on biologically than that, and for a lot of folks, right? And now we're going to turn our attention to gender identity. That was the kind of brain portion of this, and this is, what we identify as. Just by a show of hands, no judgment associated with it. How many of you have ever heard the term cisgender? Okay, so what does it mean? Anybody want to hazard a guess? Christian?
You identify with the sexual or something.
Yes. So essentially it just means biology, right, and identity match. Someone told me this actually, because I learned something new in one of my other trainings, that this chemistry reactions? So cis is like they stay on the same side, and trans, they move across, something about a bond, I don't know. I could start saying words that don't make a lot of sense, and then but that's where it essentially comes from. Am I pretty close? Okay, look, I'm so proud of myself. All right, so cisgender is where the biology and the identity match, okay? So transgender would be biology, the biological sex aspects, and identity don't match, okay? Right? So MTF, this is kind of an older terminology. How many of you have ever heard that? Someone says MTF, okay, so that male to female or male transition to female. It's not typically how we say it now. Individuals would often refer to themselves as trans women or trans woman. Okay? And sometimes this gets confusing for folks because they're like, I really don't want to make a mistake. I really want to do a good job. This is important to me. How do I know if I should be saying trans woman or trans man? And here's the best way. Always go with the expression. Okay? So this is the actress Laverne Cox, right? And so Laverne Cox is putting what out there? What's the expression? female, woman, right? That's what the expression is. That's what's out. Okay? So she is a trans woman. Okay? If anybody else has a better popular culture reference than Chaz Bono, I'm totally down, but there are not actually that many popular culture representations for trans men. So Chaz Bono is female to male, meaning assigned at birth as female, transitioned to a male identity, would be called a trans man. What's Chaz Bono putting out there in terms of expression? Male, right? Trans man. And this happens to a lot of folks. What sometimes happens with folks, so first of all, why do we say transgender instead of transgendered? You're like, oh, I don't know, we dropped the ED, what happened? Are you mailed or femaled? Would you ever refer to somebody as, oh, you're mailed? No, right? Your gender is just, or sex, is male. So it's transgender, not transgendered. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. The other thing that often happens is that people get real caught up on the genitalia, quite frankly, right? So like, oh, okay, they're putting this out as an expression, but what about the genitals? Is it ever really a good idea to ask anybody about their genitals? Just curious. No. And if you're ever compelled to do so, right? If you're ever like, I think I'm going to ask. Question whether or not you would walk up to me, I identify as a cisgender female, would you walk up to me and say, so can you tell me about your vagina? And if you would not be comfortable having that conversation with me or one of your colleagues or your friends or whatever, probably let's just not ask about folks' genitalia, right? It's just not a good idea. It's not a conversation topic. All right. Good so far on this? I've not lost anybody yet. Yay. Okay. Oh my God, are you kidding me? Okay, I was down, I got this, I got cisgender, high five. I got transgender, yeah. What is happening? Okay, so actually people identify in lots of different other ways as well. So help me understand, non-binary. Okay, so non-binary just simply means binary means on, off, zeros, ones, right? In the case of gender, that'd be male or female. People who identify as gender non-binary essentially say, I don't feel male and I don't feel female, I feel somewhere else. Could be both, could be somewhere in that spectrum, okay? Non-conforming, gender non-conforming, what's happening? What's gender non-conforming? Anybody want to take a guess? Yeah, take a guess. You're like, no, I gave you the veterinary thing. Stop it. Okay. Ask me nothing. Okay. Non-conforming. Oftentimes, this is people whose gender identities, essentially, they don't necessarily embody the social strictures around the gender they're identified as, right? So if they may identify as male or somewhere along that spectrum, but maybe have long nails and painted fingernails and all of those kinds of things and sort of non-conforming to the gender structures or strictures. Fluid. When something's fluid, it changes or moves, right? So for folks who identify as gender fluid, they move along the spectrum. Okay? Gender queer, it's kind of like a bigger statement, right? Queer basically means just not cisgender, okay? And so it may mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. Some of you in this room are old enough, I know I am, that when queer started to become part of the vernacular, I started to get a little clammy, right? Because I grew up in the 70s, right? And queer was a derogatory statement and was just never anything you were going to say or you weren't supposed to. But like lots of communities, people reclaim words. We can all think of the reclamation of words for members in a community. And queer has really come that way. Okay? This, I think, is very interesting. So this is in a study out of the Williams Institute, which is at UCLA, which finds that 27% of young Californians between the ages of 12 to 17 identify as gender nonconforming. So these folks, if they're not already on our campus, they are coming to our campus. So these issues will begin to take larger and larger importance. And these students are coming up with certain expectations of care and accommodation and a certain level of education around these kinds of topics. And as we know, in a world with shrinking enrollments currently at the community colleges and colleges in general, students will vote with their feet. If they don't feel welcomed on a particular campus, are they going to stay? They won't, right? And so it's important for us, those of us who are in the audience who are educators or interact with students, for us to educate ourselves to meet the demands and the needs of our student population. Right? Okay. All right. So then, remember we talked about expression, like how we express the identity we have. This runs on a spectrum, as we can see, from masculine, the middle androgynous, remember we started talking that was more of an expression thing, to feminine. This is irrespective, by the way, of gender identity or of sex or biology, right? So, you know, I may be biologically female, but have a very masculine presentation. And that has nothing to do with my sex, right? But that could be how I express my sex or gender, if that makes sense to everybody. All right, good so far, not good so far. We're feeling good on sex and gender identity, and I've got this, and I know this is a bigger issue, and okay, I'm feeling it. All right, so now we're going to layer on some attraction on there. Okay, so now we're going to talk about sexual orientation. So sexual orientation, by and large, is who you're attracted to. There is a difference, right, or there can be a difference between who you're attracted to sexually and who you're attracted to romantically, right? Those can actually be different. For the purposes of this talk, we're going to kind of combine them together as if they were the same thing, but that's really just for time constraints, okay? So heterosexual or straight, by the way, most people don't walk around saying so-and-so is a heterosexual, right? We typically use the term straight more often, yeah? What does it mean? I'm like, everyone's like, I don't know. That's why I showed up here today. I thought you were going to tell me. What does heterosexual mean? Or what does straight mean?
Well, heterosexual or straight typically just refers to as an attraction to the opposite sex.
Perfect. Okay, so a sexual and romantic, because we're just combining those two. We understand that they could be separated, but we're not going to do it for the purposes of this talk. Romantically, sexually attracted to members of the opposite identity or sex. Okay, gay or lesbian. Okay, so gay, kind of umbrella term, right? Could apply to either males or females. More often applied to? Good. Lesbian, right? Women who are romantically or sexually attracted to folks who identify as female. Okay? Why don't we go around asking people if you're a homosexual? Especially if you're a man. Why don't you walk around asking men, are you a homosexual? Any ideas? Okay, that's certainly true, right? Generally speaking, unless you're like actually going to hook up with this person, I'm not sure why it comes up all that often, right? But anyways, why else? So here's the thing, we can't forget our history, right? And the term homosexual was used for years to denigrate gay men, to associate them with all kinds of inappropriate behaviors that they weren't participating in, exclude them from society, and it can be incredibly triggering for gay men. So we got to be aware of that.